Not even one text message. I said it out loud just to hear something other than the low hum of the refrigerators and the ticking of the clock above the register. 10:59 a.m. My bakery's grand opening was scheduled for 11. By now, I'd imagined a crowd. Family smiling, old friends clapping, maybe even my father giving one of his stiff, proud nods. Instead, the parking lot was empty except for my neighbor's rusted pickup and a stray balloon that had blown loose, rolling lazily down the sidewalk. They didn't show up when I needed them most, but they all came running when success knocked. This is my story and you won't forget it. I took a slow breath. The air smelled of sugar and fresh bread, warm from the ovens I'd been tending since 5 that morning. Everything sparkled. Polished counters, pastel walls, handwritten chalkboard menu. I'd saved for this place for 12 years. Sold my car, used my retirement check early, and learned how to stretch a dollar until it begged for mercy. And not one of them showed up. Till I smiled. The kind of smile that sits too long on your face like makeup you forgot to wash off. "It's fine," I whispered, straightening the napkins at the counter. "They'll come later. People run late." But deep down I knew better. My daughter Karen had promised she'd help with setup. My sister said she'd try to make it between errands. My father told me not to get my hopes up. "People don't eat sweets like they used to," he'd said, as if that were the only reason not to believe in me. I looked at the banner over the door. Clara's Corner Bakery, made with love. The love part made me laugh under my breath. Love hadn't paid for the ovens or the sign or the flooring. Determination had. Loneliness had. A woman's voice called from outside. "You open yet?" I turned quickly, smoothing my apron. "Yes, ma'am. Come on in." She was the first customer, mid-40s, gray streaks in her hair, holding a grocery bag against her hip. Her eyes scanned the room like she'd walked into something too pretty for a weekday morning. "Smells wonderful," she said. "You just opened?" "Today's the first day," I said, offering her a sample of cinnamon rolls. "Still waiting for a few guests." She smiled kindly, not realizing what that meant. "Well, they're missing out." Her words hit deeper than she knew. I thanked her, took her payment, and handed her the box. As she left, she said over her shoulder, "You'll do great. Some people just don't see what's right in front of them until everyone else does." I paused, her words echoing longer than the bell above the door. Outside, the sun had shifted, pouring light through the front window, catching the shimmer of sugar on the counter. I wiped my hands and stared at my phone. No calls. No messages. Just a few social media likes from strangers. I opened the group chat I'd made for the family. The one I'd labeled Grand Opening, Saturday at 11. The last message was mine from last night. "Can't wait to see everyone tomorrow, red heart." It sat there like a joke that no one laughed at. Around noon I made coffee for myself and sat by the window. The chairs I'd borrowed from the church hall were still neatly arranged. Each had a place card with someone's name written in my best handwriting. Dad, Karen, Lydia, Uncle Paul. I'd even written Mom, though she'd been gone for 10 years. The smell of the coffee calmed me, but not enough. I thought about every comment, every doubt, every time someone said, "You're too old for this." I thought of my father's face when I told him I'd used my savings to lease the space. "You'll regret it," he'd said. "This kind of thing's for young folks." Maybe he was right. My hands trembled a little when I poured the milk. But they were steady when I baked. I took out my little notebook, the one I'd kept hidden in the flower bin where no one would think to look. Inside were names, phone numbers, and small scribbles. Church group order, mayor's secretary loves lemon bars, reporter's email from the fair. My hidden advantage. People thought I was just opening a bakery. But I'd been preparing something much bigger. The phone buzzed suddenly, startling me. A message from my landlord. "Congrats on the opening. Hope you get good traffic today." I smiled. At least someone remembered. I took another sip of coffee and looked outside again. Across the street, Mrs. Dalton was watering her roses. She gave me a wave, then looked at the empty lot, frowning a little, probably wondering where my crowd was. I waved back, pretending I didn't notice her pity. By 1 o'clock I'd sold a dozen muffins and 3 pies. Not bad for day one. Still, every sale felt like a reminder that the faces I wanted most weren't there. I wiped down the counter again just to keep my hands busy. That's when I heard laughter. Familiar, sharp, unmistakable. I turned toward the door, heart lifting for a split second. But it wasn't my daughter. It was her friend, Megan, walking past with a stroller. She peeked inside the bakery, saw me, then smiled awkwardly. "Oh, hey, Mrs. Bennett. Karen told me you were opening a bakery today." "She did she?" I said, keeping my tone even. "Yeah. She said she couldn't make it though. Something about errands? Anyway, congrats." She waved and left before I could respond. I stared at the glass door for a long time. So, my daughter remembered. She just didn't care enough to come. I walked to the counter, leaned both hands on the cool marble and closed my eyes. The humming of the fridge felt louder now. The walls felt closer. I could almost hear my father's voice again. "You'll see, Clara. You always think small things mean big success. People don't owe you applause." Maybe he was right about that too. But applause wasn't what I wanted. Not anymore. The afternoon sun hit the display case just right, making the pastries glow golden. I watched a young couple walk in holding hands. They ordered a slice of pie and coffee, laughing softly as they sat. Their warmth made the place feel alive again. As I brought them their order, the man said, "You run this place yourself?" "Yes," I said. "Every bit of it." He nodded, impressed. "That's brave. Not many people have the nerve to do something like this alone." Alone. The word hung in the air. After they left, I started cleaning again. It was nearly closing time when I heard the door chime once more. For a second I didn't even look up. "We're about to close, but I can." "Clara." The voice froze me. I looked up. My sister Lydia stood at the door, sunglasses on, holding a gift bag. "I tried to come earlier, but you know how traffic is." Her tone was casual, rehearsed. "Dad said to tell you he's proud you finally did something with your hands." Finally did something. I forced a smile. "That's sweet of him." She looked around, pretending to admire the place. "It's cute. Smaller than I thought, but cozy." "I like cozy," I said, wiping the counter. She set the bag down. "Anyway, here. A little something from me and Karen." I peeked inside. A mug that said "Keep Calm and Bake On." It still had a clearance sticker on the bottom. "Thank you," I said quietly. She sighed, fidgeting with her keys. "Don't take it personally that we didn't make it this morning. You know how life gets." I didn't answer right away. I just walked to the window and looked out. The street lights were flickering on one by one. My reflection in the glass looked calm, maybe too calm. "I baked a cake this morning," I said finally. "One of Mom's recipes. The chocolate one she used to make for birthdays. I thought you'd like a piece." She hesitated. "Oh, I shouldn't. Watching my sugar." "Of course," I said, smiling slightly. "Wouldn't want anything too sweet." The silence between us stretched. She shifted, uncomfortable, like she knew she was standing in the middle of something much bigger than a bakery. Finally she said, "Well, I should go. Maybe next time we'll all come together." "Maybe," I said. "If there's anything left to come for." Her head tilted a little, confused. But I didn't explain. I just reached under the counter, fingers brushing the small notebook hidden there, the one with the journalist's name and number. I slid it closer to me, unseen. Lydia gave a small wave, forcing a smile. "You take care, Clara." "You too," I said. When she left, I locked the door behind her, flipped the sign to closed, and turned off the lights one by one. The bakery was quiet again. The smell of sugar and butter lingered in the air. I leaned against the counter, staring at the mug she'd left behind. The clearance sticker caught the glow of the exit sign, shining like a little warning. I whispered to myself, "They don't know yet." Then I opened the notebook and circled a name. Local Gazette, Human Interest column. Tomorrow I'd bake something new. Something that would make them wish they'd shown up today. And when they finally came knocking, I'd be ready to answer. Just not the way they expected. The next morning I woke before sunrise. Same as always. The air was still, heavy with that strange quiet only early hours know. The oven light glowed faintly against the tiled walls as if watching me. I tied my apron, rolled up my sleeves, and whispered to myself, "They don't know yet." The words tasted different today, not like comfort but purpose. I turned on the mixers. The hum filled the bakery, drowning out the echoes of yesterday's silence. Sugar, butter, flour. I measured them by muscle memory. The smell of yeast rising made my chest loosen just a little. I always said baking was half therapy, half war. Today it felt like both. The dough was stubborn, like it knew I wasn't making this batch out of love. I slammed it against the counter harder than necessary, over and over, until the slap of it against wood became a rhythm. A pulse. Each strike felt like an answer to every smirk, every doubt, every you can't. Around 6 I unlocked the front door. The street was pale and sleepy, the kind of dawn that makes the world look soft but cold. A couple of joggers passed by, giving polite nods. None stopped. Fine by me. I brewed coffee for myself and leaned on the counter, watching the first glow of daylight hit the display case. The quiet gave me room to think. Too much room. Last night replayed in my mind like an old movie reel. Lydia's sunglasses, her forced smile, that clearance mug she tossed at me like a consolation prize. My hand clenched before I even realized it, and I heard the faint crunch of sugar crystals under my palm. I exhaled and brushed them away. People always think anger is loud. But mine never was. Mine lived in the small things. The way I cleaned the same spot twice, the way I labeled boxes perfectly straight, the way I baked until my hands ached just to keep from shaking. At 7 the doorbell jingled. First customer of the day. It was a young woman I'd seen once before, the one who'd bought cinnamon rolls on opening day. She smiled. Back again. Couldn't stop thinking about those. Her kindness caught me off guard. Thank you, I said. Fresh batch this morning. She leaned in, lowering her voice. I told my office about you. You'll probably see a few of us later today. I blinked. Really? Absolutely. You deserve it. There's something special here. Her words landed softly like sugar dust on buttercream, light but they stuck. After she left, I wrote something new in my notebook. Word of mouth spreads faster than apology. I didn't know yet why I wrote it, but it felt right. By mid-morning, business picked up. A few regulars stopped by. I laughed when I realized I actually had regulars now. A retired man who ordered a scone every day. 2 nurses from the clinic who always split a pie. People who didn't know my story but liked the taste of it anyway. Around 10 I caught a familiar figure standing across the street. My father. He didn't come in. He just stood there, hands in pockets, pretending to check his watch. I could see his reflection in the bakery window as I wiped down the counter. He didn't wave, didn't smile. Maybe curiosity had brought him, maybe guilt. Part of me wanted to open the door, but another part whispered, let him watch. So I did. I went on serving customers, laughing softly, the sound carrying through the glass. After about 10 minutes he turned and walked away. When the door closed behind my last morning customer, I finally let my hands tremble. Not from sadness, from something sharper. He'd looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd grown taller. By noon, the bakery smelled of caramelized sugar and roasting nuts. A warm, golden scent that made people linger at the door. That's when trouble arrived. In the shape of a woman named Carolyn Baker. She owned Sweet Crumbs, the other bakery 2 blocks away. The one that had been around since before I'd even dared to dream of opening mine. She walked in wearing pearls and that smile people use when they're pretending to be friendly. Well, if it isn't the talk of the town, she said, glancing around. Heard you opened up right under my nose. I wiped my hands on my apron. Not under. Just nearby. Her eyes flicked to my display case. You're brave. This area doesn't usually hold 2 bakeries for long. I guess we'll find out, I said lightly. She leaned closer, dropping her voice. A little advice. Lower your prices before you burn yourself out. People will always choose cheap over homemade. I smiled politely, but inside something cold tightened. Thanks for the tip, I said. But I think I'll stick with my recipe. She tilted her head, clearly annoyed that I didn't flinch. Suit yourself. Just remember, this town already has its favorite. She left a business card on the counter like a challenge and walked out, her perfume lingering like a warning. I turned the card over. On the back she'd written, competition makes enemies. Don't start something you can't finish. I stared at the words, heat crawling up my neck. Then I tossed the card into the trash. My rage didn't explode, it simmered. Like something waiting for the right temperature. That afternoon the bakery filled again. The young woman from earlier returned with her co-workers, laughing and taking pictures. This place is adorable, one of them said. You should start an Instagram. I smiled, pretending I hadn't already planned that months ago. My hidden advantage wasn't just recipes, it was knowing how stories spread. I'd learned from years of watching everyone else talk while I listened. People love stories about underdogs, especially women who refused to quit. By closing time, I was exhausted but alive in a way I hadn't been in years. The register was full. The shelves were empty. And my heart, though bruised, felt steady. Then just as I was locking up, I saw it. A smudge of black smoke curling up from the alley behind the bakery. I rushed out, heart hammering. The smell of burning paper hit me. My trash bin was smoking, flames licking at the edge. Someone had tossed a lit match or cigarette inside. I grabbed the hose and sprayed until the fire hissed out. When the smoke cleared, I saw it. A half-burned business card floating in the water. Sweet crumbs. I stood there for a long moment, staring. My hands shook, not from fear but fury. Whoever did this, whether it was Carolyn or one of her petty employees, had just lit a fuse they couldn't control. The next morning I called the Gazette. The reporter who'd covered the fair last year, a young woman named Jenny, picked up. "I remember you," she said. "The pie contest, right?" "That's me," I said. "I've got a better story now." "About the bakery?" "Yes," I said carefully. "And about what it takes to keep one alive when people want to see you fail." She hesitated. "That sounds personal." "It is," I said. "But I think your readers will like it." She agreed to stop by later in the week. After the call, I stared at my reflection in the oven door. My eyes looked different, harder but not cruel. Focused. The following days passed in a blur of flour and fire. Business grew. The neighborhood started talking. Someone mentioned seeing my photo on a local blog. A picture taken from outside through the bakery window. The caption read, "The woman who bakes alone." I should have felt exposed, but instead I smiled. Let them watch. Let them wonder. On Friday afternoon, I caught sight of Carolyn again. She was standing outside with one of her assistants, glaring in through the window. I could almost hear her grinding her teeth as she watched my customers fill every seat. I made sure to wave. Politely. When she didn't wave back, I turned away and whispered, "Fire meets flour." That night as I closed up, I sat by the counter with a slice of my own pie, my mother's recipe, and wrote in my notebook again, "Revenge doesn't always need words. Sometimes it smells like victory and sugar." The next morning I woke up before dawn, same as always. But something had changed. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt powerful. I wasn't waiting for anyone to show up anymore. Not my family, not my father, not my competitors. They were the ones waiting now. Watching. And soon, they'd see what real sweetness could do when it was baked with a little heat, and a lot of silent rage. I could feel it. From the moment I flipped the open sign that morning, something in the air was different. Charged, alive, almost humming. The quiet bakery that once felt like my secret had become a kind of stage. Customers trickled in early, more than usual. Some I recognized, the young woman from before, the retired man with his morning scone, but many I didn't. They looked around like tourists, phones in hand, taking photos of the chalkboard menu and the pastel walls. One woman leaned over the counter with a bright smile. "You're Clara, right? The one from the article." For a second I froze. Article? She pulled out her phone and showed me. There it was. My face behind the counter, the soft light of the ovens glowing behind me. The headline read, "The Woman Who Bakes Alone. A Story of Grit, Grace and Second Chances." My chest tightened. Jenny. She hadn't told me it was running today. The woman went on, "Everyone's talking about it. I came all the way from the next town to try your pies." I smiled, my throat tight. "Well, you picked a good day. The cherry crumbles fresh." She laughed, handed me her order and said, "You're an inspiration, you know that?" When she left, I leaned against the counter, letting the hum of the ovens steady me. Inspiration. No one had ever used that word about me before. Not my family. Not my friends. Certainly not my father. But now strangers were saying my name. By noon the line stretched out the door. My hands worked faster than my thoughts. The bell chimed endlessly, a rhythm that filled the silence I'd carried for years. I barely had time to breathe, but it didn't matter. The exhaustion felt wholly earned. At one point, as I slid a tray of cookies into the oven, a little girl tugged on my apron. "My mom said you're famous," she said, wide-eyed. I crouched down, smiling. "Oh, I don't know about famous." She pointed toward the window where the newspaper was displayed on a customer's table. "That's you. You're the baking lady." Something warm swelled in my chest. I ruffled her hair. "Well, maybe just a little bit." When she ran off giggling, I glanced out the window, and that's when I saw them. My father and Lydia standing across the street again. But this time they weren't pretending to pass by. They were watching openly, my father's hands gripping his cane, Lydia's sunglasses pushed up on her head as she whispered something to him. For a second I almost felt pity. Almost. I turned back to my customers and smiled brighter. Later that afternoon, Jenny herself walked in. I recognized her by her notebook and the little recorder in her hand. She waved as if we were old friends. "Clara," she said, weaving through the crowd. "You've got quite the turnout." "I noticed," I said, grinning. "You didn't warn me I'd need an extra pair of hands." She laughed. The story resonated with people. Especially women your age. They said you reminded them that it's never too late to start over. Her words settled into me like sunlight through glass, warm, fragile, but real. "I just told the truth," I said. "That's all." Jenny's eyes softened. Sometimes the truth is all people need. Before she left, she handed me a business card. "We're doing a follow-up piece next month. Maybe a photo shoot if you're open to it." I nodded, though part of me hesitated. I didn't trust easy recognition. It had a way of changing people. And I was about to be reminded of that. Around 5, I finally sat down for the first time all day. My feet throbbed. My apron was dusted white with flour and my hands smelled like vanilla and sweat. I closed my eyes for a second, breathing in the comforting mix of coffee, sugar, and faint caramel that clung to the air. Then the door opened. I didn't even look up until I heard the voice. "Well," my father said, "looks like business is booming." Every muscle in my body went still. He stood in the doorway, Lydia just behind him, both dressed like they'd come from a meeting. My father's tone was casual, but I caught the pride tucked behind it. Or maybe it was entitlement. I stood slowly. "It's been busy," I said evenly. He nodded, looking around the room like an inspector. "Nice place. Smaller than I imagined, but you made it work." Lydia gave a polite smile. "We saw your article, Clara. It's everywhere. Dad said we should stop by." "How thoughtful," I said, voice smooth but cool. They didn't notice the edge. They never did. My father cleared his throat. "Your mother would have liked this." I looked him in the eye. She would have come to the opening. The words hung between us, sharp and quiet. Lydia shifted uncomfortably. "Oh, come on, Clara. You know how schedules get." I held up a hand. "Don't. Just don't." My father's jaw tightened. "You've always taken things too personally. And you've always taken things too lightly," I said. For a moment we just stared at each other, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Then I noticed something in his hand, a folded paper. He slid it across the counter. "What's this?" I asked. "An idea," he said. "A proposal. To make this place a family business." I stared down at it. The word partnership jumped out in bold letters. He continued, "With your momentum we could expand, maybe open another branch. I can provide funding, Lydia can handle marketing. You shouldn't have to do all this alone." Alone. There it was again, that word they loved to use when it suited them. I looked up at him, my face calm though my pulse pounded in my ears. Where was this offer when I was eating dinner off paper plates and sleeping on bakery boxes? He frowned. "That's not fair." "It's honest," I said softly. Lydia sighed. "Claire, this could be big. Why make it difficult?" I folded the paper neatly and slid it back toward them. "Because I already built something big. Without your help." My father's eyes hardened. "You'll regret turning your back on family." I smiled, that same too long smile I'd worn on opening day. "Funny. That's exactly what you did." He didn't have an answer for that. He just adjusted his cane, muttered something about pride and walked out. Lydia followed, though she glanced back once, her expression unreadable. When the door shut, I sank onto the stool behind the counter. My hands were trembling again, not from weakness but release. Customers were still chatting nearby, oblivious to what had just happened. I smiled at them, took another order, poured another cup of coffee. The rhythm of the bakery steadied me again. But inside I was already thinking ahead. My father's proposal wasn't a business offer. It was a warning. They'd seen my success and realized it meant they couldn't control me anymore. They wanted in. And I wasn't about to open that door. That evening Jenny called. "Clara, I just got word. The Gazette wants to nominate you for a Community Spotlight Award next month. It's a big deal. The mayor attends." For a second I didn't speak. My throat tightened. Clara? You still there? Yes, I said softly. I'm here. Just surprised. You deserve it, she said. And it'll help the bakery even more. People love stories like yours. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in the darkened shop long after closing. Through the window, the street lights flickered on, casting a golden shimmer across the tables. I could see my reflection in the glass. Flour on my cheek, lines around my eyes deeper than I remembered, but my smile was different now. It wasn't forced. The town knew my name. The paper had written my story. And my family had come crawling back. But this was only the beginning. Later that night I pulled out my notebook. I flipped past old scribbles, orders, recipe notes, delivery schedules, until I found a blank page. At the top I wrote, "New list, people who believed too late." The names came easily. I didn't write them out of hatred, just clarity. Sometimes revenge doesn't shout, it whispers in ink. Outside, the bakery sign flickered once before going dark. I locked up, turned off the lights, and let the smell of sugar and triumph linger behind me. Tomorrow the Gazette would print my name again. Tomorrow I'd bake something new. And soon everyone, family included, would learn the same truth. The sweetest revenge isn't served cold. It's served warm with a smile and sold out by noon. Everything was gone. Every pie, every cookie, every loaf of bread. The sign outside still said open, but the shelves inside stood empty. And for the first time that emptiness didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. I leaned against the counter, catching my breath. The smell of sugar and roasted almonds still clung to the air, heavy and sweet. I looked at the clock. 11:58. I'd opened at 7, and in less than 5 hours, the town had cleaned me out. I laughed softly to myself. A sold-out bakery. My name in the paper. A mayor's award nomination. And my family pretending it was all their idea. They wanted a piece of me now, but I'd learned to slice carefully. The bell above the door jingled. I expected a late customer, but when I looked up, it was Lydia again. She had that same easy smile, the kind that always looked more like a disguise. "Busy morning?" she asked, her eyes darting to the empty cases. "Looks that way," I said. She clapped her hands together lightly. "That's amazing, Clara. I told Dad you'd built something real here. He's proud of you, you know." I raised an eyebrow. "He has a funny way of showing it." She ignored that. "He's been thinking, if you wanted help with expansion we could." I cut her off, gently but firmly. "Expansion isn't the problem. Space I can handle. It's people that get tricky." Her smile faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly. "You've always been independent. I get it. But this is your moment, Claire. You could use some guidance before things get complicated." Complicated. That was Lydia's polite word for out of your control. "I think I've managed fine so far," I said. He sighed, pretending patience. "You know, Dad's contacts could get you featured in bigger papers. He knows a guy at the Chronicle. That kind of exposure could change your life." I wiped the counter slowly, keeping my tone even. My life already changed. And I did it without his contacts. Lydia's mouth tightened. "You don't have to be defensive." "I'm not. I'm just busy." Her eyes scanned the bakery again. "You've always been stubborn. Mom used to say you'd rather starve than accept help." "She was right," I said quietly. That stopped her. The silence that followed felt like heat between us, not loud but pulsing. Finally, Lydia sighed and set down a small envelope. "Dad said to give you this. Just think about it." I didn't pick it up. "I'll think about it when he starts showing up for me instead of sending things through you." She hesitated at the door, her hand on the knob. "You're not the only one who's been through things, Clara." "No," I said, "but I'm the only one who baked my way through them." She didn't reply. Just left quietly, letting the bell announce her retreat. I waited until she was gone before I opened the envelope. Inside was a check. $10,000. The note said, "For future growth. Family support." I stared at it for a long time, then slipped it into my notebook between 2 blank pages. Not to cash it. Just to remember it existed. Later that afternoon, Jenny stopped by again, camera in hand. "I need a few shots for the follow-up," she said. "Mind if I grab a few while you work?" I smiled. "Go ahead. I'll pretend not to notice." She took pictures as I kneaded dough, arranged pastries, wiped counters. Between clicks she said, "You know, your story's getting traction online. A lot of women are sharing it, saying you give them hope. Hope's a heavy thing to carry, I said softly. Jenny lowered her camera. You carry it well. For a moment the noise of the world faded, just the ticking of the clock and the soft scrape of her camera strap against her coat. Then she asked, would you ever tell the part about your family? The opening day. My hands paused. Why? People love honesty. And yours could inspire others who've been let down by the people closest to them. I hesitated. The temptation was sharp. To say it all. To let the world know what they did. But something inside me, the same quiet voice that got me through those lonely nights, whispered, not yet. Maybe one day, I said. Jenny smiled like she understood. When you're ready. That evening the Gazette posted my photo on social media. By the time I got home my phone was buzzing nonstop. Comments. Congratulations. Messages from strangers. And one from Karen. It popped up around midnight. Mom saw your picture. You look amazing. We should catch up soon, Red Heart. For a long time I just stared at it. I hadn't heard from her in nearly a year. She hadn't called on my birthday. She hadn't come to the opening. I typed, deleted, retyped. Finally I sent. You know where to find me. No emojis. No warmth. Just truth. I turned off my phone but sleep never came easy that night. I kept seeing her face. My little girl who used to sit on the counter licking cookie dough laughing that messy laugh. And now a stranger reaching out because she saw my name trending. They all wanted a piece of me. Even the ones who'd left me starving for affection. The next morning I arrived at the bakery before dawn. A small package sat on the doorstep wrapped in brown paper. No return label. I carried it inside, unwrapped it carefully and found a sleek, polished plaque inside. Read. Congratulations, Clara Bennett, Community Spotlight honoree. There was a note from Jenny. The mayor's office confirmed it. Ceremony next Friday. Where something read. I smiled despite myself. Red. I hadn't worn red since my husband's funeral. Too bold, too alive. Maybe it was time to change that. As I was hanging the plaque on the wall, the doorbell rang. A man in a suit stood there. Mrs. Bennett? He asked. I represent your father. He'd like to discuss a possible business merger. I almost laughed. A merger. He nodded. He believes a family partnership could benefit all parties. He's prepared to offer a substantial investment. Tell him no, I said. The man blinked. Excuse me. Tell him no, I repeated. Tell him the bakery's already taken by the woman who built it. The man hesitated. Are you certain? It's a generous offer. I'm sure, I said. And you can tell him this. Family doesn't buy a seat at the table after dessert's been served. His lips pressed into a thin line. Very well. He tipped his hat slightly and left. I watched him go, then locked the door behind him. My reflection stared back at me from the glass. Calm, steady, almost smiling. By the weekend the bakery was busier than ever. Orders flooded in faster than I could bake. Jenny's article had gone viral and tourists were showing up with cameras, eager to taste the sweet rebellion, as one headline called it. That phrase stuck with me, sweet rebellion. Fit. Every cake, every loaf, every pie was a quiet act of defiance. Around midday Karen walked in. I froze mid-sentence as I was helping a customer. She stood near the doorway, hesitant, dressed too nicely for the place. City clothes, high heels that didn't belong on my old tile floor. Mom, she said softly. It had been so long since I'd heard her voice in person that my chest ached. Karen, I said, keeping my tone even. What brings you here? She smiled nervously. I wanted to see it for myself. Everyone's been talking about you. I wiped my hands on my apron. They talk more now than they ever did when I needed them to. She looked down. I know I should have come sooner. I wasn't there for you and I'm sorry. Her voice cracked slightly, but I didn't rush to comfort her. I'd spent too many years trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix. I'm glad you came, I said at last. But don't come here to apologize. Come here to buy something. She blinked. What? If you want to support me, do it the same way everyone else does. Order a slice of pie. Her eyes shimmered, hurt, guilt, maybe both. But she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Apple, please. I served her the biggest slice we had. As she took her first bite, tears slipped down her cheek. It's perfect, she said. I smiled. It took practice. That night I stayed late after closing, the plaque glinting on the wall beside me. The bakery was silent, but it didn't feel empty anymore. My phone buzzed. Another message from my father. I didn't open it. I just slid it to the side and kept wiping down the counter. They all wanted a piece of me now. But I'd learned something they never would. The real power wasn't in being wanted. It was in knowing when to say no. And as I turned off the lights and stepped into the cool night air, I whispered to myself, next Friday they'll all see what no really means. Next Friday came faster than I expected. The morning light spilled across the bakery floor, soft and golden, warming the empty chairs I'd arranged by the window. The smell of cinnamon and butter filled the air, not the scent of comfort anymore but of control. Every pastry cooling on the racks felt like proof that I'd built something permanent, something they couldn't take from me. Outside, the mayor's car pulled up early. He stepped out with his assistant, both dressed neatly, holding the plaque for the ceremony. Behind them came a photographer and 2 reporters. One of them was Jenny. Her smile was bright, her camera already in hand. I straightened my apron and whispered to myself, let them see. The bakery filled quickly. Neighbors, customers, even strangers who'd read about me in the papers. And, of course, my family. I saw them before they saw me. My father in his dark coat, standing tall despite the cane. Lydia at his side, whispering something I couldn't hear. And behind them Karen, clutching her purse like a peace offering. For a moment I watched from behind the counter. I let the sight soak in. The people who once turned away now pushing their way through a crowd that had come to celebrate me. Jenny caught my eye and grinned. Ready, Clara? I nodded. More than ready. The ceremony began. The mayor said a few kind words about determination, community, and women who rebuild themselves. I stood beside him, smiling politely as flashbulbs flickered. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped forward, the paper in my hands trembling just slightly, not from fear but from power. Thank you, I began, my voice steady. When I first opened this bakery, I didn't imagine a crowd like this. On opening day, I only had a few customers. The rest of the seats were empty. A ripple of sympathetic murmurs passed through the crowd. I glanced toward my father. His jaw tightened. But I learned something that day, I continued. When no one shows up for you, you stop waiting at the door. You start baking anyway. You start building anyway. You stop needing permission to rise. Jenny smiled from behind the camera. The mayor nodded approvingly. I let the silence hang for a moment before delivering the next line. And eventually the same people who didn't believe in you come back, hungry. There were small chuckles from the crowd, but I wasn't joking. My father looked away. Lydia pressed her lips together. I've been asked many times, I said, how I kept going. The truth is simple. I remembered every no I ever heard and I turned each one into sugar. Applause followed, warm, genuine. But I wasn't finished. I reached for the small remote on the podium and clicked. The projector screen flickered to life on the far wall. It showed old photos. My first burnt pie, the empty chairs from opening day, the flower-streaked notebooks I'd kept hidden. Then the final image. The newspaper clipping that had started it all, with the headline "The Woman Who Bakes Alone." Jenny had provided it for the ceremony, but I'd added something she hadn't seen. The next slide appeared. A picture of the same bakery that day, taken from outside through the glass. You could see the reflection clearly. My father, Lydia, both walking away while I stood inside, smiling at the empty tables. Gasps rippled through the audience. I kept my voice calm. That photo was taken on my opening day. I didn't realize until weeks later that someone had captured that moment. I was inside, believing no one cared. Turns out they were right there, just not coming in. The room went silent. My father's face drained of color. Lydia whispered something sharp, but I didn't stop. Sometimes, I said softly, love doesn't fail you, people do. But failure has a way of feeding ambition. I wouldn't trade that silence for anything. Because from it I learned exactly who I am. Applause broke out again, hesitant at first, then building into a steady rhythm. I smiled, thanked the mayor and stepped back. As the crowd swarmed in for photos, I saw Karen standing near the doorway, her eyes glistening. My father and Lydia moved toward me, their smiles forced. That was quite the speech, my father said, his tone carefully neutral. Just the truth, I replied. Lydia crossed her arms. Did you really have to show that picture? I did, I said. People like honesty, remember? My father frowned. You've made your point. Now about the partnership. I cut him off with a smile. Oh, it's already been handled. He blinked. Handled. Jenny appeared beside us, handing me a folder. Just in time, she said quietly. Inside were the legal papers I'd filed earlier that week. Documents making Claire's Corner Bakery a registered non-profit sponsor for young women starting small businesses. I looked my father in the eye. This bakery won't be a family business, I said. But it will be a family for those who never had one. His lips parted, then closed again. Lydia looked stunned. You're giving away your profits? My father asked, disbelief softening into anger. I'm investing them, I corrected. In people who believe, not people who only show up after success. Jenny raised her camera again. Mind if I get one more shot? I smiled at her. Make sure you get everyone in the frame. She did. The flash went off, capturing me, the plaque, the bakery, and behind me the family who'd once left me alone now standing in my shadow. The event ended with laughter, congratulations, and too many hands shaking mine. When the crowd finally left, the shop grew quiet again. Jenny packed up her camera and touched my arm. You know, she said softly, that speech is going to go viral by tomorrow. I smiled, tired but calm. Then maybe someone else will bake a little braver tomorrow. She gave me a look, part admiration, part awe, and left. The sun dipped low outside, casting long amber lines through the bakery windows. Karen stayed behind, standing awkwardly near the counter. I didn't know you'd do that, she said. I didn't either, I admitted. Not until I stood up there. Her eyes were wet. I was wrong, Mom. About everything. I thought you were chasing something impossible. I brushed flour off the counter. That's what made it worth catching. She stepped closer. Can I help here? Even just part-time? I paused. The mother in me wanted to say yes instantly. But the woman I'd become hesitated. Maybe, I said gently. But not until you know what helping really means. This place wasn't built from love alone. It was built from being forgotten. She nodded slowly, understanding that this wasn't a punishment. It was a lesson. I'll earn it, she whispered. I know, I said. You're my daughter. By nightfall I was alone again. The bakery was spotless, the ovens cooling, the plaque hanging perfectly straight on the wall. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window. Outside the street was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to scare me. Now it felt like peace. I thought about the years I'd spent waiting for approval that never came. About the long nights when doubt was louder than the ticking clock. And about how somehow every no had turned into the fuel that carried me here. My father's check still sat tucked in my notebook, untouched. I took it out, looked at it one last time, then tore it clean down the middle. It didn't feel bitter. It felt right. I threw the pieces into the trash and whispered, debt settled. When I stepped outside, the air was crisp and cool, the moon hanging like a silver coin over the bakery sign. The faint smell of sugar drifted into the night. Across the street, I saw my father's car parked for a moment before it pulled away. No words. No gestures. Just a quiet exit, fitting really. I watched the taillights disappear, then turned the key in the bakery door. The lock clicked shut, solid and satisfying. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel angry. I felt full, not from food, but from knowing I'd finished something that began in silence. I whispered to the empty street, you all taught me what not to become. And then, smiling to myself, I added, for that I'll always thank you. I turned off the lights, the bakery glowing for a moment longer before fading to darkness. The town still said my name, but now it wasn't out of pity or gossip. It was out of respect. And that was the sweetest thing I'd ever made. If this story hit your heart, subscribe for more real, emotional revenge stories. Because every woman deserves to see how silence can become strength.